Well, welcome to our regular Wednesday press briefing. Today we're pleased to have with us Heidi Gantwerk and Isabella Firth from Viewpoint Learning. They were the folks that conducted the community dialogues for the municipality as we wanted to, going into the 2011 budget process in particular, engage the community in more in-depth dialogue about what are the wants and needs of the community, what are we willing to pay for, and what areas should we look at to try and achieve efficiencies. And it was a very, very interesting series of sessions. I was able to attend all of them, didn't stay through all of them, but was able to at least get a sense at each dialogue of what the public was saying. And they've now, of course, assimilated all that into the final report, which is both available in hard copy. It's also available online. You just check on the Muni homepage. And just one of the discussion points that happened in the recent Assembly work session that just concluded was somebody asked a very great question of where do you go from here, how do you continue the dialogue, and just so folks know, you can go onto the website and under the 2011 budget survey, we ask a number of questions regarding the 2011 budget that people can respond to. And also in the AWWU water bill, there's a paper version of the survey that was sent out, and we've already got 145 responses, and they just went out yesterday or the day before. So we're anticipating a pretty good response from the public on at least that section of the dialogue. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Heidi and let her recap for you some of the key points that we learned from the dialogues. And Heidi?
I'm going to give a very shortened version of this presentation, so I'm probably going to go a little quickly, and my apologies in advance for that, but I'm happy to take any questions afterwards. So the meeting, I want to talk just a little bit about what we did, about what are the implications for leaders, and what are the key findings from these sessions. Okay. So just so you know, the conveners of this, 4 conveners, the University of Alaska Anchorage, the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce, Commonwealth North, and the Eagle River Chamber of Commerce, all co-convened. Funding came from Rasmussen Foundation, North Rim Bank, First National Bank of Alaska, and the municipality. All contributed, along with the Embassy Suites and the school district, who contributed meeting space and audiovisual equipment. We had 4 sessions. There were about 350 people who participated in total in these 4 sessions. My hair is taller than me. The first group was an invited group, which we did through sampling to try and get a group of unusual suspects, people who don't generally come to public meetings, more representative. The others were open to the public. All zip codes but 1 were represented. The group was slightly older and wealthier than Anchorage as a whole, and there was a somewhat lower representation of minorities in the entire sample. Nonetheless, there was a great diversity of opinions, perspectives, and worldviews coming in. People definitely did not all see things the same way walking into the room. We had 2 discussions. The first covered the future we want for Anchorage. We gave them a set of choices and trade-offs there. The first, reduce services and keep taxes low. The second, tax to the cap to maintain services. And the third, increase taxes to improve services. There was a lot of background material on each of these choices. We also gave them a 20-minute presentation explaining what was going on in Anchorage and why this was necessary. Second choice was, how do you balance the budget? Given we've described an Anchorage we want to live in and some core values, what service cuts or additions do we want to make? And what sources of revenue do we think make sense? What mix of revenues? What should we do to existing revenues? And what new revenues might we want to think about? Okay, so the key findings, and what I'm going to talk about here are the aggregate numbers. Okay, these are the findings considered across all 4 dialogues. I will say that the first session, which was that representative sample, did not look very different from the aggregate, which is really interesting and important for us to note. There were some differences with the 4th group, but for the most part, the aggregate stands in all of the questions. Core values, things everybody said. They love Anchorage, they love Alaska. They'd lived here a long time, they wanted to see it continue to improve. An ethic of mutual responsibility, care for those less fortunate, taking care of one another. That was woven throughout these discussions. That was a very strong value. A sense that officials generally mean well. We did not hear a lot about corruption and criminal behavior and people pocketing money. People really thought that their public officials were doing their best. However, they were very, very frustrated with what they saw as inefficiency in government. They thought it was widespread and pervasive, and that there was much that could be done in lieu of cutting services or raising revenues to increase efficiency and find more money that way. They also really didn't know much about what steps have already been taken by this administration to address inefficiencies. So they reframed the choices, and ultimately they came up with several top priorities. The first was really to avoid cuts. There was no area where they felt there was just too much, we could live without it, we don't need those services. That was not where people went off the bat. They wanted to see efficiency gains first and foremost. They felt that we could really improve the level of service without raising more money by being more efficient. If they could do that, before they wanted to see cuts, they would be willing to pay more in taxes. Let me be clear, they did not want to see that all come in property taxes. They were strongly opposed to seeing any tax and all tax increase come in the form of property taxes. They wanted to see a diversified tax base. Okay? On services and spending, they didn't want large service cuts. They were very uncomfortable with that. In particular, any services that impacted lower income or less fortunate folks in Anchorage. They were very strong on that. They wanted to, again, see those inefficiencies addressed. If cuts had to be made, they had two criteria. One was, what are the biggest budget areas? Because cutting it from the very small areas of the budget, health and human services, and public transportation, they said you don't get much back for that, and you hurt a lot of people. So they focused on three areas in particular: administrative and support services, maintenance and operations, police. In addition to these being the biggest budget categories, it's also where people perceive the most inefficiencies to be going on. They had numerous examples in each of those areas of what they saw as glaring inefficiencies, redundancies, siloization, and ways that we could really find significant cost savings in there. I will say that when we asked people, forced them to choose where they would make cuts, many people chose nothing. They were so resistant to seeing cuts made at all. There were, in terms of what they wanted to maintain and expand, fire protection was critical. Police was essential, but again, they thought there could be significant efficiency gains made in police. We didn't just need to pour more money into it. Public transportation and health and human services, they wanted to hold harmless. Those were services that impacted lower income people. They felt it was very important to keep the money in those budgets. On revenues, they were generally willing to see taxes go up, if necessary, again, to maintain what they saw as important essential services, but only, and this is critical and it's not in the numbers because we didn't ask this question specifically, if efficiency gains came first. There has to be a significant commitment to making gains in efficiency and to being transparent about that before they would consider a tax increase. Given that, a majority excuse me, was willing to see their taxes go up. Now, when you ask people about specific amounts, that majority goes down, but it's still a majority. Again, not property taxes. They didn't want to see that in the form of property taxes. They wanted to see more diversified. About 73% said they wanted to see a more diversified tax base, which meant even if revenues stayed the same, then you take some out of property taxes, put some into other forms. They did not feel it was fair to continue putting the entire burden of the city's tax base on property owners. Okay, on the revenue side of things, they had responses. We tested specific revenue options. The alcohol excise tax was majority support in all the meetings with very little opposition. People thought that was a good idea, and there wasn't a strong constituency who thought it was a very bad idea. Sales tax, about half the participants thought either a seasonal sales tax or a year-round sales tax was a good idea. At the same time, you had a significant majority who thought it was a very bad idea, who would be strongly opposed to that. In user fees and fines, there was a real mix of support and opposition. For the most part, people did not want to see increases in things like the cost of bus service, because again, that would impact people who really couldn't afford it. They wanted to see increases in fines for people who ran a red light. They wanted to see increases in the cost to rent a facility for a party, things like that, where it was a choice that somebody could make. And again, property taxes, opposition. Overall, I would say there was a sense that they preferred to tax actions and choices, what people do, as opposed to what they are or what they have. So hence, a property tax, you might have bought that house a long time ago. You really don't have much say in what the market value is, and you don't have much say in what your tax rate is. However, a sales tax, you can choose what you buy or don't buy. An alcohol excise tax, you can choose whether you buy that alcohol or not. So we have a set of recommendations coming out of that, some implications. First, we think it's critical that the mayor and the assembly, that the administration looks at ways to engage the public and address the budget in a number of ways. Identify and address inefficiencies, and to create systems that are public to prevent them from recurring. Some of these inefficiencies are significant financially, some are not, but they're powerfully symbolic. And it's important to address the things the public perceives as inefficiencies.